Okay, my name's Trent Cutler. I work for a company called CompuNet. We're a Cisco VAR out of Boise, Idaho. We deal with a lot of companies in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. Today we're going to be talking about spectrum analysis, primarily tools that you would use that you would go in without kind of interrupting client connectivity, mostly diagnostic stuff. I know a lot of you guys, well, actually everyone here got the YSpy DBX in your bags, which is great. Some of you have been using the Spectrum XT. We're going to kind of talk about some of the differences, and the goal of this is not to declare a winner. It's to kind of bring out the pros of each one in a way that will make your decision much more difficult. Okay. Oh, and also, Keith, thank you for doing this. It's been great. I've learned a lot, and another side benefit to all of this is we actually finally get to meet and make good connections and have beers with one another. So that's been great. For next year, it would be kind of nice to have a cool photo on the front of the wireless LAN. You know, like when they have like sports teams and they kind of have like two people like up there. Anyway, they were doing the professional headshots and that happened. So.
Is that before or after the drink?
It was actually before. So. Okay. So. Like I kind of started out saying, we're going to be talking about the Spectrum XT and the YSpy DBX, and I'm going to throw in the Cisco Clean Air in there as well. And there's going to be some vendors that are saying, hey, we offer spectrum analysis too. And the rules that I made up for how I chose these were completely arbitrary. So basically what I decided was it had to be a Wi-Fi centric spectrum analyzer, so meaning that it has some Wi-Fi tools built into it that help you with your job. And I didn't want you as a professional to go into an environment and have to take down a radio so you can do a monitor mode. Now some of that is changing with some of the vendors where they actually have a dedicated radio to listen and put into monitor mode so they can do WIPs and spectrum analysis. So that is changing, but I want you guys to have a tool on hand because you're not always going to have ability to access a customer's infrastructure or dashboard or something like that. The reason that Cisco Clean Air is in there is because you can actually do spectrum analysis of the channel in use without affecting the Wi-Fi. But more specifically, why I'm talking about that is because Metageek has announced that they are going to be bringing that hardware into a form factor that you can put on a laptop and take in. So what you see in this is most likely going to be something very similar to what is going to come out as a hardware. Unless that changes, then they can butt in and talk about that. So some notable alternatives. There's the vendor solutions, there's the Oscium YSpy, and the Hack RF. Now these are not Wi-Fi centric, so they didn't really meet my arbitrary criteria, so we're not going to be talking about them. There's some other ones like Nuts About Nets, they've got one, and they also wrote the software for a little handheld one, which is actually pretty cool, so look into that a little bit more. It's a handheld one with a little graphical display that you can take out, and it does a wide range of spectrum, and then you can plug it into a computer and use some software that looks somewhat similar to the ones that we'll be talking about as well. The Hack RF is not available as of right now. They did kind of a Kickstarter. It's a cheap software-defined radio that can do spectrum analysis, and it can also do packet analysis. And there's some people on the forums that are already decoding like cellular transmissions, and that's one tool that you can be using for spectrum analysis and packet analysis in theory. The technology is probably not going to be as good as we all want it to be, but it's going to give you a lot more resolution and freedom to do what you can do. Now it's going to put you into a Linux world because that's where a lot of the GNU radio and other tools that would use that hardware, that's where it's going to be. But software-defined radio is coming, and there's a lot of interesting hardware pieces coming that will be available soon. So why Cisco Clean Air? I kind of went over this a little bit already, but there's spectrum analysis software, which we are going to be talking about anyway, which is Channelizer. That's the one that you guys got in your handbag. So, you know, if that is there, that is something that we can talk about, and it's hardware that's going to be available. It's hardware that a lot of you are familiar with. I know that the Cogneo card was very popular among the professionals, and so it is something that people do want to see, and we'll talk about why that is and why it is such a powerful piece of hardware. We'll skip over those. Anyway, so our portable spectrum analyzer is necessary, and this was kind of an interesting conversation that happened during Jay's packet analysis thing, because, you know, some people will argue that well, I mean, it's a very good argument that packet analysis is always going to be better from the AP's perspective, because you do get to actually see what is hitting the radio's interface. But there are times where a portable USB spectrum analyzer or a packet analyzer is going to be better, because there are some things that you may want to see and troubleshoot from a client's perspective. And for the same reason, spectrum analysis is also beneficial, because there may be some things that do not come as clear to a access point infrastructure spectrum analyzer. For example, a guy sitting at his desk using wireless headphones, okay? That may be out of the range of what the access point can actually see or determine to be bad interference. But once you are walking around with a spectrum analyzer, you'll notice something getting hot, and you'll walk up to this guy with his headphones on and be like, what are you doing? So there is, in my opinion, a very real need to still have spectrum analysis, portable spectrum analyzers, because you can walk around the area and determine hot spots. And Blake Croney has made a good point on the No Strings Attached show, so I'm going to make a plug for that. If you don't subscribe to that podcast, do it, because they talk about some very relevant things. And one of the things that he mentioned was that when he does a site survey, he does it differently than he would when he's checking for coverage or for planning purposes. He'll do a site survey with a spectrum analyzer, and it's done very differently, because he lets the spectrum analyzer guide where he's going. Okay, so it's kind of like playing a game of hot or cold, but you're not really looking for something unless you see something register on the spectrum analyzer, and then you can go find it. So in the case of wireless headphones and wireless headsets, which are, you know, popping up in cubicle environments or environments where they don't necessarily have a spectrum policy, it is nice to be able to walk into an environment and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to just do a quick check to see if I see anything go on. And in that sense, a portable spectrum analyzer can be complementary to an infrastructure spectrum analysis system. Do both, okay? You know, as a professional, you definitely want to have as many tools as you can to make sure that things are operating with, you know, very high uptimes. Some of the guys in the medical industry have talked about how important it is that they have, you know, prolonged connectivity, and they have guaranteed uptimes, and they have to troubleshoot all of those things. Well, spectrum analysis is something that can go on that. So this is Kurt Vonnegut. I'm sure there's people that love and adore him here, right? He's kind of a, no? Okay. Well, Slaughterhouse-Five, really? Like, okay, good. I want to stand as close to the edge as I can without going over. Out on the edge, you can see all kinds of things you can't see from the center. And that's kind of why a portable spectrum analyzer can give you a little bit more view. You definitely need to go out and see things with a spectrum analyzer. So for today's conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about what the hardware looks like. I don't really want to get, I forgot to set my clock. Okay, well, whatever. Thanks. There are some subtle differences in the hardware, and specifically the YSpy is not going to function like the Clean Air or the Spectrum XT, because they have designed their own hardware, and they're not using kind of a Wi-Fi chipset, they are actually going to scan differently, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So the chipsets, you know, Texas Instruments, Bandspeed, Cognio, Marvell, it's not that big of a deal, but the ranges, and these are all the default ranges. The Metageek guys will say they've got channelizers, a different channelizer that you can load on and you know, go to some other ranges like the public safety band, which is 4.9. But as far as the 2.4 goes, the YSpy DBX covers the same ranges as all of the other ones. I put the Cisco Clean Air just so it meets my qualifications of not bringing down a radio to one Wi-Fi channel, so whatever Wi-Fi channel you're on. But the hardware itself will do the public safety band as well as the Spectrum XT. If you want the public safety band with the YSpy, you have to buy a different tool.
Is it likely that if the FCC approves additional spectrum, not in the center, but they're looking at 5.9 gig, that you're going to have to buy new hardware? I mean, it's that right near the end there.
Well, I don't see anyone touching the Cognio hardware to modify that. So, yes. Ask the Metageek guys. The YSpy, if you're familiar with how Bluetooth works, that's kind of how the YSpy is doing it. It is essentially doing a frequency hop at each single step to take a reading. Whereas the Spectrum XT and the Cisco Clean Air, they're going to do a very small width of fast Fourier transform, where they are actually listening on 20 megahertz, whereas the YSpy is looking at one step at a time and piecing it all together. Now the problem with doing single frequency readings is that you can get out of sync with a Bluetooth device or some other device that's also frequency hopping. In the same sense that when you are videotaping a car driving and you see the wheels spin, but it looks like they're going backwards, you know, like you can get out of sync with those, and in some cases you don't see a lot of it. And the thing about Bluetooth is it's very low duty cycle, and sometimes you'll look at what the Cognio card is showing and it'll say it's everywhere, and you'll look at your duty cycle and it's not really, you know, that prevalent, even from the readings. So there's a few things that we'll kind of go in our live example, and we'll kind of point out these things and how you can know and how you can interpret those, so you're not walking into an environment and saying, there's Bluetooth and it's terrible and we're gonna have to rip out everything and the 2.4 gigahertz is crap. You know, there are things that we can to look at to kind of make sure that we're making the correct assessment based on all of that. I probably talk about this later, but well, we'll go on. Okay. So resolution bandwidth, these are the stated specifications from the websites. The Spectrum XT values, I speculate on those because it's a Wi-Fi card. So it's going to be roughly the same as the Clean Air, but you'll see some differences on that. The YSpy DBX, they take steps at every 333 kilohertz, and then they have a resolution bandwidth of 192. That's their defaults. They'll also make a recommendation saying that the resolution bandwidth needs to be 125% of the steps. So there's something interesting going on there. You'll have to ask them about that. So the congestion displayed. We've heard a lot of talk about designing for congestion, and Andrew von Naj, apparently that's how it's pronounced. No, I'm not joking. So we do have medium contention on this, and it's not always co-channel interference, because you know the amount of client devices you have in your own wireless network and on that channel is going to affect the performance of every client device. And from my experience looking at lots of interference that comes and goes, we used to see a lot more non-Wi-Fi transmitters. It was a lot more prevalent. There were a lot more cordless phones, and now as professionals, where Wi-Fi has grown and taken up, we're seeing a lot of other things move towards Wi-Fi, using that as their connectivity to do whatever they're doing as far as a technology base. Especially, in the medical world, where you saw a lot of crazy things that were wireless, they're now going to start using Wi-Fi or Zigbee or something like that. Something that's a little bit more friendly instead of competing for it. So we're having less analog transmissions and more kind of moving towards using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or something like that that is contention based. So something that I like about the YSpy actually is, in the time that the YSpy takes to scan 20 megahertz, it will hear multiple transmitters at varying signal strengths. So it's going to take a reading, and then it's going to move, and it's going to take a reading, and it's going to take a move. It's going to move and then take a reading. What that means is that you're going to have a transmission that was 20 megahertz wide at a certain height, a certain RSSI, and then you're going to have another transmission at a different RSSI, and another transmission like this, right? Well, as it moves, it kind of takes a sampling of each, which gives it kind of a better mixed, it gives a better mixed display of those different transmissions, so you can kind of see, oh, I've got something here, and I've got something here, and something here. Whereas the Spectrum XT and also the Cognio card, they're going to take that 20 megahertz reading, and they're going to send you, the average, the max, or something like that. But it tends to have a lot more higher readings. So whatever is closer to your spectrum analyzer is going to affect your results. You're not going to see stuff that's happening a lot lower. And if your card is on, your Wi-Fi card, you are going to see a lot more activity because your Wi-Fi card is on, and it's kind of saturating what you see here. And you'll actually be able to see that because I have some Wi-Fi devices here, and you'll see my card scanning. We'll see everyone's card scanning, but you'll see my card taking up a lot more of that. And also, if I turn on a Bluetooth device here, you're going to see that take up a lot of the spectrum as well. So it's interesting to, something like the YSpy, it's not as powerful, but in a way it does give a better representation of a mixed environment a little bit better. Yes?
You're referring to amplitude, I guess, more than...
amplitude, yes.
Okay, so if you're more concentrating on utilization, would it be fair to say that's less of an issue?
Yes. So Scott brings up a really good point, because the Spectrum XT and the Cognio card for the Clean Air, those are going to give more accurate representation of utilization, because they are actually listening to, in the way that a Wi-Fi card works, they are going to listen to that. When the way that the YSpy steps like this, it's going to miss a fair amount. So the representation of the YSpy's utilization is not going to be as good as the Spectrum XT or the Cognio. Now, I said I was going to make this decision very hard for you, and you're not going to be able to really, hopefully, determine a winner after this, because we'll look at this, but the way that you are looking at the utilization readings from either the Cognio or the Spectrum XT, they're going to be fluctuating so much, it's going to be hard for you to get a baseline based on all of that. One thing that is interesting, if you were to do an iPerf with, Access Agility's tool that you all get, you can change those settings so you are, not transmitting a whole bunch of frames, as much as you can. You can say, well, basically, you can make sure that it's not saturating it all the time, but to a spectrum analyzer, it's going to say it's still saturated 100%. And that's where packet analysis is going to be a little bit better of an indicator of airtime, because it's going to listen to every single packet and say, you still have this much airtime, whereas spectrum analyzer is going to be like, it looks busy to me, okay? Okay, I threw this slide in just because it's an interesting conversation to have. It doesn't really have any impact on what we're doing, but filter bandwidth resolution. For example, and we're going to talk about the YSpy because it is stepping like this. So every single green little triangle that you see here, this is a step. And that step is going to open up just a little bit to listen, and you can change the width that it's listening to. And that will determine what it detects and what it measures. So in this case, if this red line was a transmission, a narrowband transmission, if you see it falls directly in between those two steps. So you don't have a reading, and it's not going to have anything to display underneath. Whereas when you have the filter bandwidth resolution set so it overlaps a little bit, you will get a reading in between those. And in some cases, if you have multiple overlaps, you'll have a wider display. And that ends up looking something like this, and I stole this off another person's website. I gave him credit for it. Okay, but you can see that there are, if you look right here, there's 3 transmissions, but as you have wider resolution bandwidth, it starts making them look wider, and in some cases, if you have too large of resolution bandwidth, it just merges them all together. It's kind of the same thing as like a blurry photo. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about classification. Now we're still in the hardware section, and so some of these devices are going to do classification from the chipset itself. The YSpy DBX, you have a manual type of classification. The automated is, we'll talk about that a little bit more. It's not going to be in the same sense that some of the other devices will do. This YSpy DBX and Spectrum XT will both allow you to do a custom classification or signature library. And then as far as automatic classification go, Spectrum XT and the Cisco Clean Air or the Cognio card will do automatic classification. Oh, and the automated, yeah. The Spectrum XT will actually, even if it doesn't know what it sees, it will come up and say, there's an unknown thing, would you like to classify it? So it does do something like that. Whereas if something is not in the library of the YSpy DBX or Channelizer, it's not going to do anything for you. Okay. The Spectrum XT, it's pretty accurate. There are false positives. You can see, for example, here, wireless camera, but if you look, you'll see wireless camera duty cycle is 0. So I've had some people email me some Spectrum XT captures and be like, there's a jammer here. And I sit there and I wait for the recording, and there is no jammer. Okay. Now if I had people emailing me about all the things that the Channelizer software has said that was in their environment that wasn't, again, you know, it's a different level of accuracy. So as far as feature classification goes, it automatically creates new classifiers, and users can send and receive custom classifier libraries. Now the Cisco Clean Air Channelizer local mode, the identification is done by the chipset. You cannot create a classifier if you see one in the software there. It's very accurate, and it's even accurate at low RSSI values. So that is something to be said about the Channelizer. If it doesn't match a certain shape, meaning if you are not within the same range of the, there's a signature in their library, and that signature has a very defined shape. If you are not within a range, a specific range or a threshold of where that classifier was created, it's not going to do a great job of matching it. And what I mean by that is, if I'm sitting next to the classifier and I make a signature like this, it's not going to, the shape of that classifier is not going to be the same if I were to walk down, you know, let's say 100 feet. It's not going to look the same, and it's not going to match. So in some cases, you may want to create another signature so you can be far away and it kind of identifies it, but at the same time, that increases your likelihood of false positives. So in the Clean Air, it's accurate at low RSSI values, and it's nice because it identifies multiple instances of Bluetooth. There likely will not be any new classifiers since the Cognio acquisition, but they do have a pretty decent catch-all identification thing. So you can have some idea of something that pops up.
Isn't that kind of limit? It's like if there really isn't going to be, like if Cisco hasn't done anything since Cognio in terms of new classifiers.
They may. I mean, they may. You'll have to ask the Metagate guys. Okay, so the classification in Channelizer, and this is kind of called the footprint or a pattern matching algorithm. You will have false positives, and we'll go over some ways that you can reduce the amount of false positives. But more importantly, I want you guys to be able to look at things and gauge whether something is interfering or not without having to rely on classification, because I think that's going to be a better way of performing spectrum analysis instead of just saying, hey, 7 instances of Bluetooth, so we're going to have to rip it all out. Okay. They have a blanket Bluetooth signature, so that just basically means there's Bluetooth here. Okay, and it works pretty well. It's not going to show up in your actual density graph as well as some of the other ones. They don't have a microwave oven identification. So how many of you have encountered a microwave oven? Okay, the microwave oven is probably the most difficult one to like visually identify because it just kind of is noise everywhere and it makes kind of an interesting pattern in the waterfall. The classification of the Channelizer does not have a microwave oven, so that's kind of one that a lot of people rely on knowing is if there's microwave ovens and if it's affecting. The Channelizer will not actually identify the microwave oven interference. The default library is not currently maintained, so you can have new ones. They may have some new ones coming up in the future of different patterns. My guess is there probably won't be because we aren't seeing as many new transmitters as we used to. A lot of, like I was saying, a lot of the technologies are going to Wi-Fi based or Zigbee or Bluetooth based. So there probably won't be a lot of need to have classification above and beyond this, you know, outside of corner cases or medical devices. So the users can generate custom signatures, but there isn't a great way of sharing them. Okay, so there is no way to say, all right, team, here is signature library. These are the kinds of interference that we are encountering in our hospital, and here's how you can find them. There's no way for you to hand that to your team and have kind of a default library or a default setting, because with the Channelizer software, there's all different kinds of nerd knobs for you to change the threshold of how confident it is when it shows you a transmitter, right? There's all these knobs, but you cannot necessarily say, I have tweaked all of these up so you don't see, you know, Bluetooth when there's not Bluetooth, or there's, you know, a Logitech headset. You can't tweak those and then send those out to someone else and say, all right, here, you cannot mess this up, because you may get a phone call from one of your team members saying, we got a Logitech headset and it's everywhere. I see it everywhere, right? And then all of a sudden you look at the recording and you're like, okay, it's not really, you need to twist this knob and this knob and this knob and this knob. Okay, now go there and only call me when you see something. Okay, so we're going to talk about the software now that we've got the hardware out. Definitely, if you have hardware questions, ask John or the Metageek guys over here. They'll be able to answer your questions better than I will. So the software, the Cisco Clean Air, the YSpy DBX, they both use Channelizer. It's now Channelizer 5. If you want to have Channelizer work with Clean Air, you have to buy kind of a different license for it, and then above and beyond that you can have reporting as well. All right, so as far as the software customizability, some of this matters. I mean, we do like nerd knobs and ways of viewing things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the Spectrum XT definitely gives you more things to change, your max values and put this pane in here, look at the Wi-Fi data here, look at the interference tables here. It is far more customizable. The channelizer, it puts you in a more controlled environment. You're stuck with their UI. There's things that you can change, but it's more limited. And in some ways it's good, in some ways it's bad. Same with the Spectrum XT. The customizability is nice at times, but once you get it into a place that you'll like, it doesn't remember that very well. And so every single time you're opening or changing your views, you have to change this again and get it back to the place you like until you eventually give up. So there's, not to be defeatist, but you eventually end up using the same views that they default to. So seeing a laundry list of customizability for the Spectrum XT it's interesting, and there's some really nice, good charts that I like in there, but I find myself adjusting it and eventually saying, okay, I don't have time for this. Okay. The other nice thing about the channelizer, it remembers your customization. So as soon as you close it and you open it up again, it remembers what you had on and what you had off. And the same thing goes for your thresholds that you had as well.
Aruba actually has great spectral functionality built into the controller of the DUPs. It also has an offline tool you can send a file to Summit to view. Have you connected to these guys?
Have I ran into them or like used their files?
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Compared the functionality of Aruba to Spectrum.
I haven't. Sorry. I'm sure a lot of people in here would appreciate kind of a YouTube comparison, or a blog or something like that. That'd be good. As far as the ease of use, there's more accurate classification in the Spectrum XT. So in some ways, it's easier to trust someone to go out there and say, okay, if you see something with a high duty cycle, look here. Again, there's false positives in both, so be aware of that. It's pretty good for device-specific location. So if you want to catch an instance of a Bluetooth transmitter or something like that, you can latch onto that and find it a little bit easier. I've heard feedback on the directional antenna that it can be something like a rabbit hole when you're trying to find something. So there is also that. And the classifier creation is pretty good too. The channelizer classification is not as intuitive, so most of you will probably be stuck in their classifier land just with their default library. The ease of use for report generation on both of them is pretty good. The Spectrum XT is just going to create one for you of everything it saw, whereas the channelizer one, it's actually quite nice where you can just take this, put it here, take this, put it here, and highlight really good instances of interference or things that you encountered at a different time. For post-analysis, hands down, by far, channelizer will win because it allows you to quickly go to points of interest. I declared a winner, I'm sorry. But I'll show you what I mean as far as the playback of the Spectrum XT files go. It can be, if you get paid by the hour, it's great. Thank you. All right, so I have 15 minutes, so I'm just going to jump into this. I talked longer than I thought I would. All right, so this is what the spectrum analysis of the YSpy looks like. And you'll notice we see a lot of the really skinny lines going across, and that's because the YSpy is taking very small steps and reporting it as quickly as it can. Okay, now if we were to open up the Spectrum XT, you guys, it is okay to make fun of me for using Windows 8. It's been a miserable time. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay. And we are going to get spectrogram here. And I am going to, and this is what I was kind of talking about, how you do have to kind of fix everything that if you like something one way or the other, it's not going to remember that you like your waterfall to go top to bottom. Most of you are probably not going to care enough to like change it every single time, but for our purposes, we need to have them kind of match the best that we can. Yes, but I don't want the waterfall navigation there. So, okay. So you can kind of see the difference of how they are actually working from a hardware perspective. You'll notice that the Spectrum XT is going to do something like it's called the max hold. So they are taking some of the max values and presenting those with the red line. Their average is down here, and this is going to be more representative of the noise floor. And you can see the waterfall differences. The spectrogram of this Spectrum XT is going to be more filled because the readings that it gives you are going to be 20 megahertz wide readings, okay? Whereas the YSpy is going to be a little bit more spotty. Now the density view is where MediGeek really kind of compensates for the quickness that you can identify something in the Spectrum XT. Because the Spectrum XT, you can say, oh, there's a curved shape or there's a flat top shape, that's Wi-Fi, or you can immediately see a transmitter come on. So in the case of having a interfering device, you can actually see it very quickly here, and you can see it here as well. Okay, so this is kind of another interesting conversation because the actual amplitude, the capabilities of the YSpy are going to be a little bit better than the Spectrum XT. You'll notice that the peak of this narrowband transmitter is there, but it kind of fills out and makes it look like the noise floor is a lot higher than it really is. Okay, and we can see that in several instances where it'll be kind of chunks, you know, a block kind of raised. And basically they're doing some sort of low noise amplification of that 20 megahertz chunk and putting it upward. What this looks like in the density view, and this is you know, this is up to everyone else's opinion, but if you do any changes for any of these views here, you are going to reset it. Okay, whereas with the channelizer, if you want to go back in time, it's very quickly, you can catch up to real time like this, and you haven't affected your data, your waterfall, or anything like that. And another thing that I've noticed, and I'll do this now so you can kind of see, is I'm not sure if the density view actually, like in Spectrum XT, actually drops data. So you just have to wait a really long time for something to eventually be so, the percentage of its actual activity was so rare. But we'll get into a few other things that we can kind of compare what the transmitters looks like, and I'll open up what the clean air looks like as well. So another one, so a jammer. These are fun. Yeah, hopefully they're not doing anything. Oh yeah, shoot. They are doing a live demo. Don't tweet that I did that. I don't want them to know. Okay. So, I did mention that I was going to talk a little bit about this, so I want to make sure that I bring it up right now. You'll notice that the duty cycle here is fluctuating so quickly, and it'll go from 10 to 50 to, you know, it's changing very rapidly. And the same thing is true for their channel density here, or their channel duty cycle. So that's nice. It gives you it'll tell you the difference between non-Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi. So you can see that here. The channelizer tool is not going to do that. It's going to give you a reading of just channel utilization. So what it deems, what the activity that occurs above -80, you can change that threshold if you want. It's saying, right now, if you look here, this channel has 30% of its activity is occurring above 80 dBm, -80 dBm. That's basically what it's saying. But we can actually go to a different point in time and narrow in on this jammer to see what the utilization was. So the playback is very, very useful, because if one of your team members sends you a recording and say, hey, I saw a jammer, how do you go back to that point in time and actually see if there was a jammer and evaluate it to be significant or not? Yes?
But I think what you're saying early on with, I guess, the hardware and the Spectrum XT being essentially more capable, and you can see low duty cycle, Bluetooth more accurately, is that what's really demonstrated in the Spectrum view? Like, you can see, for me, it's noisier. Like, it's more difficult to see what's going on. You know, all the low duty cycle blue,
yeah,
the Spectrum XT sort of clouds the higher duty cycle. Is that sort of, that's what you're getting at earlier? Is that what sort of represents? Well,
what I was getting at earlier was the duty cycle, the utilization that we see here. Wi-Fi activity is happening so quickly that the card is going to say it's busy, it's busy, it's busy, to all the way up to 100%. But there may have been, you know, spacing or contention windows where it actually wasn't busy during that. Did I answer your question? No.
Well, what I was saying is the Spectrum view compared between the two.
Yeah.
The sort of higher accuracy, I guess you could say, in Spectrum XT, it's good for low duty cycle, but you're not that worried about low duty cycle. So it's almost a hindrance when I look at the view. It stands out like a high duty cycle that you're really looking for.
Yeah.
Sort of stands out better in channelizer.
Yes.
Like
it's
an ironic kind of.
Yeah, and the nice thing is like this time window that they have in channelizer, where it's, you know, 20 seconds here, it means it's dropping off data. Whereas if you look here, we still have that narrowband transmitter popping up in the density view. So if you think about when you take a picture with a long exposure of, you know, cars driving by and everything is blurred, if you're being mobile doing a site survey with a Spectrum XT, this density view is not going to do you a lot of good. You're going to be stuck with the real-time FFT. And for some people, that's plenty good, because it's going to give, you know, good shapes seeing that. Now, if I wanted to turn on Bluetooth, Okay, so the Bluetooth, you can see these little these spikes here show up, these little teeth marks. And to channelizer, the Bluetooth is going to look like these blue teeth. Get it? Do you see what they did there? Yeah. It's like blue teeth of a comb, right? But what's nice about all of this is when you have the interferers turned on for channelizer, it'll actually kind of draw the Bluetooth shape, okay? And the nerd knobs down here below, like I was talking about, being able to say these levels are too low for you, you can say only show me if you are this much confident in the pattern that you're seeing here, okay? So typically you're going to want it turned up fairly high, because then it'll only come in and say there's interference here and I'm very confident that it's there. Now the Spectrum XT, it's going to come in and it's going to say there is Bluetooth here, and it's going to be able to do lots of things. You can double click on it and it's going to allow you to track that Bluetooth down. The DBX not going to be able to track down a Bluetooth transmitter. Okay. Okay, as far as device finding goes, I'll turn this guy on, and I'll show you the difference between finding transmitters. So you'll notice, because we're dropping off old data in the YSpy DBX, you can kind of see it start to fill up. As that thing in the waterfall fills in that entire time span, that means it is 100% utilization for your time span. Okay, so it'll eventually hit red when it hits over 50%. And you'll notice it's telling me that this is a Logitech headset. And it only does that based on the pattern or that shape that it makes. But for the device finding, you highlight it and you say device finder. Now this is going to be an amplitude measurement of just that small frequency range that I highlighted. If I go back to the narrowband jammer here, and click find. So how this is going to work for the YSpy, if I were to walk away or cover my hands, yes?
When you do that selection of YSpy, does it remove all this scanning time?
No. It's going to use the same data. You can see when I cover the antenna with my hands, and the same thing is true for the Spectrum XT. So they both, the Spectrum XT is smarter in the way that it says, hey, there's a narrowband jammer here. Let me help you find it. Whereas the YSpy DBX, you have to say, oh, I see something interfering here. Let me click it and highlight it. Go to device finder and then try and find it. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, jump on to, what's my time? 2 minutes? Oh, man. Yes. Okay. So one of the benefits of the Cognio hardware is that it's going to give you 2.4 and 5 gigahertz simultaneous. The Spectrum XT can do that, not in all of its displays. And one of the important differences in the Spectrum XT software is that you have to have it set up to be doing mixed mode, and that limits your views that you can actually be doing. So there is some of that. The playback of the Spectrum XT, if any of you have done that, it's very hard to go to a point in time, because you go to a point in time, then you have to wait for it to do. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to record this TV show, but I only want to see this one commercial. But then having to watch the entire TV show just to see that one important part, okay? So, more time is involved, but some of you bill by the hour, it's cool. Here's what it looks like in the 5 gigahertz for the Cognio card. You can see it's pulling up a lot of the Wi-Fi signatures. And to turn that off, I generally think that it's too noisy like this, so I'll just go to the interfering devices. This is kind of cool. I don't know if they talked about it in their session, but you can actually filter by duty cycle of transmitter. So you can say, only show me if it's severe enough that I care about. I had a bunch of other things that I was going to do, but I'm out of time, so I'll just end it. If you have questions, John is here with Spectrum XT, Brian and Stoney are here with MetaGeek, so feel free to ask them about it. And that's all I have.